choke on this!
When it comes to the He-Man universe, we get to see a lot of different types of villains, and one of the fan favorites has to be the humanoid skunk-like villain known as Stinkor. With a powerfully pungent smell, it is rather interesting to see a villain use this as his weapon. While in theory the idea of the power may seem silly, the way we see Stinkor use his powers definitely is not. And today in our video, we will take a deep dive into how Stinkor ended up this way and how strong he is with this goofy power.
Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin.
Descent of Betrayal, Stinkor's recruitment by Skeletor. When you first come across this stinky villain, it may be a little hard to realize that he is one of the Pelesians. Pelesians are a race of creatures present in the world of He-Man who look like they are a crossbreed of house cats and koala bear. They are big and round and soft-looking with seemingly big yellow eyes. There was a small village known as Pelesia that was the place for these creatures. One day, the sorceress came across this village. She was treated kindly by the people there, and she formed a bond with them. Her life was becoming sort of normal when suddenly Warlord Parvis showed up. He wanted to destroy the village, and he specifically targeted the places where the weaponry was kept. This was understandably a little weird, and it was clear that this was an inside job unless someone had betrayed him from the villagers. There is no way he would have known where he was meant to go and attack, and soon enough, the villagers had their answers. It turns out that this attack was aided by one of their own known as Oedipus. Oedipus always had a knack for being evil. He was a petty thief, and while that was a horrible thing to do, it did not satisfy him enough. He wanted to do something that even was more evil, and when he was thinking about what he could do, he decided that maybe helping the Warlord Parvis would be a good idea. When the Warlord was invading his village, although a child, Oedipus specifically pointed out all the places where the villagers kept their weapons, making sure that the villagers had nowhere to run and no way to defend themselves against the ruthlessness of the Warlord. He did all of this hoping that the Warlord would be happy with him and take him with him, but the Warlord had no such intention. By the time Oedipus realized that he had already aided the Warlord in the destruction of 75% of his village. Luckily, the whole village was not destroyed because of the sorceress. As the sorceress was in the village, she summoned whatever energy that she had and banished the Warlord away from them. While the danger was gone, life was not going to be easier for Oedipus because now all of his villagers knew that he was the one who had brought the Warlord there, and they had no intention of being kind to him. Soon enough, Oedipus was judged by the village elders for his crime, and he was given the harshest punishment that he could have been given, which was to be exiled and never to return. Oedipus was not expecting such punishment, but then again, he did bring severe ruin to his village, and it would have been a marvel of God himself if he had not been punished for it. But all this punishment did was make him realize that being evil was his true calling, and instead of thinking about wanting to change himself and be a better person, he decided that he should simply just keep being evil. In fact, he wanted to be with the best evil people in the whole of Eternia, as in he wanted to join Skeletor and his team, but he had no idea how to. He was wandering aimlessly around Eternia when the opportunity presented itself. At the base of the Snake Mountain, Oedipus found a lab that was full of several chemicals and whatnot. Things seemed rather interesting, and he decided to sneak in, hoping to steal whatever parts seemed cool enough, and most importantly expensive enough so that he could steal it and sell it. However, before he could browse through everything, he noticed people approaching, and it turned out it was Triclops, one of the members of Skeletor's evil horde. Seeing one of his idols so close to him made Oedipus stop dead in his tracks and keep watching. Triclops went through all the things that were present in this lab until he found the thing he was looking for, the ambrosia. Before Triclops could leave with it, though, He-Man showed up. He showed up with his friends who were ready to prevent Triclops from taking whatever he was planning on taking with him, and a fight broke out. This fight was brutal, and the villains were only able to escape because Roboto, one of the heroes, ended up making a mistake in a calculation, which led to the collapse of the ceiling. This whole fight was witnessed by Oedipus, and he was sure that he wanted to join the evil horde even more after it because he hated how He-Man foiled the plans. Oedipus somehow managed to show up at Triclops' lab where he was working on a machine. See, Beastman, their team member, had a really bad body odor. To get rid of that, Triclops was working on a machine with the ambrosia that he was trying to retrieve. The plan was to add a tiny amount of ambrosia into the machine and use it to fix Beastman's and his body odor problem. When Oedipus showed up like a devoted fanboy, Triclops was not too happy about it. He was in the middle of his his work, and on top of that, when his master Skeletor called him over, he had to leave everything the way it was and go meet with Skeletor. While Triclops was not in the room, Oedipus gave in to his curiosity and poured the ambrosia into the machine that Triclops was working on. Instead of pouring a little bit of it, Oedipus poured a whole bottle, leading to an explosion in the lab. This explosion led to a mutation in Stinkor's physique. While he grew taller and stronger, he also ended up with a horrible stench, which was extremely foul. He was called upon by Skeletor, and Stinkor tried to give his pitch as to why he should be a part of Skeletor's team, but Skeletor was not interested. He brushed Stinkor aside and told him to leave. Stinkor left rather dejected, and he walked through the evergreen forest in his depression, not noticing that he was stinking up everything that was around him. His stink was so strong that it even dried out live plants, and the pungent odor freaked out a bunch of unilopes that were grazing around. The panicked unilopes made their way towards the royal palace, which the heroes had to stop. Unknowingly, all of this chaos was noticed by Skeletor using his drone. He realized that Stinkor would be a great addition to his team and decided to bring him back. Once Stinkor was back, Skeletor gifted him with a suit that would contain his body odor for him, along with giving him a breathing apparatus because Stinkor himself is not very immune to his body odor. Once his new member was decked out, Skeletor gave him his plan, and Stinkor really liked it. The next morning, when most of the palace was asleep, Stinkor stanked up the entire palace, making everyone come out to find the source. He-Man and his friends went after to find the source while the rest of the palace was evacuated. Stinkor was meant to keep everyone busy while Skeletor and his team could take over the palace while it was empty. This plan was seemingly working as the heroes were rather preoccupied with Stinkor. However, Roboto soon enough figured out that the best way to defeat Stinkor would be to get rid of his oxygen mask and expose him to the stink of his body, which is what Cringer did. When the mask came off, Stinkor lost his footing, which made it easy for He-Man to use him as a weapon and throw him at the approaching team of the Evil Horde, who were conveniently not wearing their gas masks. So the Evil Horde was overwhelmed by the body odor of Stinkor and had to retreat for the sake of their health. However, even though this plan was a failure, Stinkor was accepted as a part of Skeletor's team, and that is how he ended up this way. Scented Schemes, Stinkor's adventure into Masters of the Universe. Over the entire run of the show, Stinkor has proved time and time again that while it may seem like his power of being the stinkiest in the room can be akin to a constant fart joke, this power can be used to create a lot of chaos. The best episode that showcases that is episode 28 of the show He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. In the episode titled To Walk with Dragons, we're dealing with a rather interesting situation. It turns out that all of the neighboring kings of Eternia had decided to come together for a security summit in a way. The royal family of Eternia wanted to bring all the kingdoms together to talk about Skeletor and his evil horde and the danger that they pose. They were going to talk about everything that all the kingdoms can do to be safe and present a united front against the forces of evil. This meeting is obviously very important, and as there are so many important people present here, it is of utmost importance that everyone is on their best behavior and the safety and security of the members are ensured. Duncan had been worrying himself sick to the point of insomnia over this meeting because he wanted to keep all the people of Eternia and the representatives safe. Pressure was on, and Skeletor learned about it all through his handy-dandy little drone thing. He obviously could not just sit there and watch the people of Eternia plan his downfall, so he asked all the members of his evil horde to think of some fabulous ideas to get rid of this meeting or at least cause some issues there. So Beastman suggested his pets, the Serpentinosaurs. Serpentinosaurs are big snake-like creatures that can fly. These creatures are huge and extremely scary, so they would definitely get the job done. However, there is one issue: these Serpentinosaurs are scared of dragons. If the dragons of Eternia realized that the Serpentinosaurs were out and about, the dragons would definitely attack them, which would be bad news for them. So if the plan was to ruin the meeting with the Serpentinosaurs, then the dragons would have to be out of the picture. So Skeletor decided to use Stinkor for this. Stinkor's smell is extremely rancid, and this would affect the dragons quite a bit. With that assumption, Stinkor was sent near the place where the dragons usually stayed, and it worked. Because of his stench, the dragons flew far away from Eternia after getting spooked. This left Eternos, the capital, quite vulnerable to the invasion by the Serpentinosaurs. When He-Man and his friends noticed that the dragons had disappeared, they realized that something might have been off there. They decided that they would make dragon walkers, these tank-like vehicles that are shaped like dragons just in case, as a substitute. Soon enough, they were attacked by Serpentinosaurs. The 3 Serpentinosaurs that showed up proved to be quite a bit for the heroes, but they were able to fend them off, but they soon realized that the Serpentinosaurs were not planning on going away. They were just doing a quick regrouping, and soon enough the heroes were attacked by more than 5 Serpentinosaurs. The fight was definitely a losing one, and that is why Orko and Stratos left to find the dragon. While the heroes fought the Serpentinosaurs valiantly, 2 Serpentinosaurs decided to disengage from the fight and go towards the palace where all the royal members were. He-Man ended up borrowing an energy core to charge up his Dragon Walker and to go after those Serpentinosaurs, while everyone else kept the other Serpentinosaurs at bay. The battle finally ended when Orko and Stratos were able to bring the dragons back to Eterno successfully. This led to the dragons taking care of most of the Serpentinosaurs, and the ones that were left were taken care of by the energy core that He-Man was using to charge up his Dragon Walker. Seeing how Stinkor's stink gas was able to rile up such old ancient creatures was a rather interesting thing to watch. We also get to see the creative way Stinkor uses his gas beams whenever he is fighting against his enemies. In the episode of Rise of Snake Men Part 1, where the heroes of Eternia got the news from Zodak that King Hiss could be rising again to get control over the Snake Mountain, they came to Skeletor to warn him. But instead of listening to whatever they had to say, Skeletor wanted to punish the trespassers, and this led to the heroes fighting it out with the villains. Stinkor faced off against Mecha-Neck. For those who do not know, Mecha-Neck is the one who can stretch his neck and only his neck in whichever way he wants. As they engaged in combat, Stinkor blew his gas beam, and Mecha-Neck elongated his neck so that his nose was above the gas bubble. But this technique only lasted for a second because Stinkor directed the gas to the Mecha Man's face and kept directing it upwards. The Mecha Man kept elongating his neck in this way and that way to avoid the gas, but he eventually hit his head on a rock and had to succumb to the gas bubble that was following. This brilliant ability to project the gas in whichever direction he wants obviously comes from Stinkor's suit that Triclops made for him. After this battle was over, the heroes left without actually getting to warn Skeletor about King Hiss and his rise, which led to their being taken care of by surprise upon returning to the Snake Mountain. It turns out that Evelyn had betrayed them and sided with King Hiss, aiding in his arrival, along with the arrival of his Snake Men, which included Tongue Lasher, Snake Face, and Squeeze. Skeletor was swiftly defeated by King Hiss, and then Snake Face turned Stinker, Merman, and Beastman into stone by making him look at his face. This was undone by Skeletor when the heroes were able to defeat King Hiss and his men with the help of Zodak. Once King Hiss was defeated, Skeletor was able to free himself from the underground prison that King Hiss had trapped him in, and on being freed, he reverted back to all the magic that was done by King Hiss, and turned his loyal followers back into themselves, including Stinkor.
Hey! I found it!
Stinkor's Return Masters of the Universe Revelation 2021. The Masters of the Universe Revelation, which came out in 2021, was a rather anticipated TV series. After quite a few years, He-Man fans were getting the long-awaited sequel of their favorite series, and while the reviews about this show were mixed, one thing a lot of OG fans enjoyed was the Eternian lore this story brought. In this story, a huge battle happened between the forces of good and evil known as the Final Battle, and after that, the magic that we saw reign in Eternia for so long disappeared. That is because the sword that we see Adam wield is basically the nexus of all magical things in this universe, and once the final battle ended, his sword was broken apart and the pieces of the sword went back to the realms where they were made. This obviously means that the original sword that Adam wielded no longer exists. With the center of magic no longer there was no magic present in Eternia. So any item on Eternia that was said to be related to the magical properties of old magic itself was considered to be extremely expensive and rare. The Glove of Globola was one such artifact. As we mentioned before, Stinkor was originally a petty thief. In this 2021 reboot, he reprised his role as one too. Instead of being a petty thief though, this time he decided to steal a magic item, like the Glove of Globola, with the intentions of selling it to the highest bidder as one does. He broke into the place where the priestess of Globola kept the glove safe, took it from here, and escaped. He hid it in his pile of garbage and waited for the highest bidder to show up. However, instead of the highest bidder, the ones who showed up were Teela and Andra, our main protagonist duo in the series. They were hired by the priestess to retrieve Globola's glove, so Andra, the team engineer, made a device that would track the magical signals of this glove. Using that, they ended up in the lair where Stinkor was hiding under a pile of garbage. When Android found the glove, Stinkor jumped out of the pile and attacked him with his stink beam. Teela dissipated the gas that encircled him by rotating her staff in circles, spanning it away. Once the gas had dissipated, Andra and Teela defeated Stinkor, left him unconscious in the marketplace right outside his lair, and returned to the priestess with a Glove of Globola. How powerful is Stinkor? There's no doubt that Stinkor's biggest strength is his stench. With a stench that can even dry out flowers, scare unilopes, and to running away and dragons leaving their home place, Stinkor has quite the weapon at his disposal. But on top of that, he also has a rather developed physique for his species. As we have mentioned before, Stinkor, who is a Pelesian, ended up getting in an accident which led to him developing this stench. Other than that, this also led to him developing a very developed physique. We literally see him grow in his size, both in muscles and his height. This glow up in his physique made him quite the opponent to go against when it came to combat. Fighting a stinky opponent is already a difficult task in itself, but when you make that opponent dexterous and agile, it becomes quite difficult to beat. Marvelous verdict. Stinkor never made it to the She-Ra Princess of Power show because the premise of this character sounded like a constant fart joke. But that is not what the 2002 He-Man and the Masters of the Universe and 2021 Masters of the Universe Revelation thought, and as a fan, I'm glad that they did not. Stinkor is a rather interesting character. While his wrongdoings are indeed wrong, and I'm not supporting him, there has to be something special about him because even Skeletor treats him very nicely. Thanks to him and everything. If Skeletor can find Stinkor likable, why don't we?
If you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone.
Call me Stinkor!